The ballroom exploded in applause. Strings of golden lights dangled from the ceiling, flickering over the marble floor where couples twirled, heels clicked, and champagne glasses clinked like some fairy tale everyone except me had been invited into. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. Ladies and gentlemen, the bride and groom, shouted the MC, and a loud cheer went up. I took one slow step onto the stage, holding the microphone I had just been handed. My job was simple: give a short congratulatory toast to my cousin Danielle. We grew up like sisters. She'd personally asked me to do it, even said, "You better be up there with me." But as I approached the front of the platform, a hand shoved my shoulder from behind. I stumbled, nearly falling on the train of Danielle's gown. "What are you doing?" hissed my brother, Ryan, towering over me in his designer tuxedo. "This is for family. Stay in the back where you belong." "I am family," I said quietly, my grip tightening on the mic. "You work at a gas station," he scoffed. "You smell like diesel and sadness." And then came my father's voice, clear and cruel through the echoing mic. "She's just here for the leftovers." Still pumping gas at 30. Laughter burst from the crowd. My aunts, uncles, cousins. Even Danielle gave me a confused glance, not sure whether to step in or stay in her picture-perfect fairy tale. But I didn't flinch. I smiled. Not wide. Not fake. Just that little smile people give when they already know something you don't. I slipped my phone out of my pocket, typed a single word, and hit send. Then I calmly walked to the edge of the stage and sat down, legs crossed, looking like I had all the time in the world. 30 seconds later, the sound came. WHUP, 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 WHUP. Guests turned their heads. One of my uncles peered out the grand hall's side window and shouted, "Is that a?" The windows rattled. The chandeliers shivered. Then the ballroom doors flew open, and a gust of wind whooshed in, sending napkins fluttering and skirts whipping. Standing in the doorway was a man in a dark, tailored suit. 6'3", clean-shaven, steel-gray eyes. His gaze scanned the room once, then landed on me. He stepped forward, heels echoing on marble, and the room fell into stunned silence. I stood, slowly, like I had practiced this moment in a mirror 10,000 times. Because I had. He reached me and said just one thing. "Ready to go, Ms. Blake?" And in that second, the whole room shifted. Ryan's jaw dropped. My father's wine glass slipped from his hand and shattered. Danielle covered her mouth. And my brother, who once laughed when I asked him to co-sign a loan, literally stumbled back into the wedding cake. Because the man standing beside me wasn't just anyone. He was Nathaniel Pierce, billionaire, CEO of Arcadia Energy, the youngest Fortune 500 CEO in the country. And he just flew in on my call. Because I wasn't a gas station girl anymore. And I never was. The silence didn't last. It shattered, piece by piece, in whispers and gasps as every guest began murmuring like a hive disturbed. "Is that really Nathaniel Pierce? Oh my God, he's in Forbes. He just called her Ms. Blake. Wait, her?" Danielle blinked, visibly pale beneath her airbrush makeup, caught between the confetti of her dream wedding and the storm that had just walked through the doors. Nathaniel placed a gentle hand on my back. "Do you want to stay?" he asked, low enough only I could hear. I looked around the room. At my father, who once said I was a waste of tuition money after I dropped out to take care of Mom. At my brother, who once stood outside my rundown apartment, laughing as he peeled off in his Tesla. At my uncle, who refused to hug me at the last family Christmas because I smelled like burnt oil. "No," I said. "I've already seen enough." Nathaniel gave a soft nod, then looked up and addressed the room with calm clarity. "I apologize for the interruption, but Miss Blake's presence is urgently required." A few people chuckled nervously, unsure if this was a show, until they heard it. Another rotor blade, another helicopter, then the third. The crowd swiveled toward the windows like a wave. Outside, 3 gleaming black helicopters hovered in a perfect line, their polished bodies reflecting the ballroom chandeliers. My father's voice croaked. What the hell is going on? I thought she worked at a gas station, someone whispered. I turned slowly, walked down the steps from the stage, heels echoing like hammers in the stunned silence. Nathaniel followed, but I paused beside Ryan. He looked up at me like he'd seen a ghost. My brother. My bully. The man who once said, "You'll never be anything. You peaked at 19. I looked at him, head tilted slightly, and said calmly, "You always liked being the center of attention, Ryan. Hope the cake was worth it." He opened his mouth to reply, then closed it. I passed by my father, who stared at Nathaniel like his brain was refusing to process reality. I didn't need to say anything to him. Not yet. As we reached the doors, Danielle called out weakly, "Wait, Zoe." I paused but didn't turn around, because I didn't need to look back. Everything that mattered was ahead of me now. Nathaniel opened the door for me, like a man who'd done it 1,000 times before. Once outside, the wind whipped through my hair. Paparazzi had already gathered. God knows how they always know. We stepped toward the sleek helicopter waiting center lawn. A uniformed pilot opened the side hatch with a salute. As I stepped inside, Nathaniel leaned in close and whispered in my ear, "You still want to announce it now?" I looked at him, then down at my phone, where the draft message waited. One button away from sending a press release that would set the entire city on fire. I smiled. Let them wonder. A little longer. He smirked. Cruel. Not cruel, I said. Strategic. As the rotors roared and we lifted into the darkening sky, I looked down at the wedding tent below. From up here, the people who humiliated me looked like ants scrambling for cover. And suddenly I realized I didn't need revenge. I was the revenge. The helicopter cut through the sky like a blade. Lights below twinkled across the city, but my mind wasn't on the skyline. It was still at the wedding. The way their faces dropped, fascination, shock, guilt, fear, all blending into something priceless. But none of it was luck. None of it was overnight. Because while they laughed at me for working a minimum wage job, I was building something they'd never see coming. Nathaniel passed me a glass of sparkling water. You okay? I nodded, gripping it, then loosening my hold. Yeah. I didn't expect it to feel like that. Like what? Like I finally had nothing to prove, and they knew it. He leaned back, studying me with the same quiet intensity he had when we first met. Not at some glamorous party, but at a busted-up Chevron station at 3 a.m. when his car had broken down. I was the only one working that shift. Grease on my sleeves. Bags under my eyes. No idea who he was. And still I helped him. Gave him free coffee. Let him borrow my phone. Sat with him when he looked too exhausted to drive. I didn't even ask his name. But 2 weeks later, he returned. With a business card and an offer. I could use someone like you. Not just for the job. For everything. That's how I became his silent partner. Off the record. At my request. Because I wanted to earn every bit of it without being called someone's girlfriend or kept woman. And I did. Over the next 4 years, while I kept that gas station job to protect my mother's medical insurance, Nathaniel helped me build an investment portfolio. Helped me go back to school under a fake name. Taught me the world of private equity, of startups, of buyouts. I made millions before I ever stepped out of that apron. But I never told my family. Why would I? They didn't care where I disappeared to between shifts. They never asked where the bruises on my hands came from, or why I couldn't make it to Thanksgiving because I was flying to Tokyo. They didn't want to see me win. But now? Now, they had no choice. The helicopter touched down on the rooftop of a 65-story building, Pierce Holdings HQ. As I stepped out, Nathaniel offered his hand. You sure you want to go through with this tonight? I turned to him. They pushed me off a stage. I said, voice steady. Laughed at me like I was a bug under their shoe. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing this for clarity. He smiled. Then it's time. We descended into the top floor, where a polished boardroom awaited, gleaming glass, black marble, dimmed lights. My assistant, Harper, already had the folders lined up. Press release goes out in 45 minutes, she said. Your father's firm is already flagged in the preliminary acquisition alert. Good, I replied. Let them see it before anyone else. Because what they didn't know yet, what none of them knew, was that I had just bought out 67% of my father's investment firm through a shell acquisition. Effective tomorrow morning, I'd be the new majority owner. And the only call they'd be getting would come from me. The next morning was crisp, cool, and uncaring. I sat alone on the balcony of my penthouse, robe cinched around my waist, coffee in hand, eyes fixed on the phone screen like it was a loaded weapon. Across every business channel, CNBC, Bloomberg, The Wall Street Journal, my name was front and center. Zoe Blake acquires majority stake in Hawthorne Capital. And under that headline, daughter of founding partner executes silent takeover after years of estrangement. The reporters were already circling like vultures over a fresh carcass. But I wasn't thinking about headlines. I was thinking about the moment they'd see them. At exactly 9:02 a.m., my brother Ryan texted me. What the hell is this? Tell me it's fake. 9:04 a.m., my father called. I let it ring out. Then another. Then another. Until finally I picked up. Zoe, he said, breathless. You've made a mistake. This isn't a game. I'm not playing, I said calmly. But maybe now you'll stop treating me like a pawn. He was silent. Then, with a desperate edge. How did you even? Who gave you the capital? I earned it. You work at a gas station. I almost laughed. You've said that so many times, Dad. You might want to retire that line. Especially since I now sign your checks. Silence. Thick. Unbreathable. Then came the explosion. You humiliated me. You could have come to me. I'm your father. And I did. Once. Remember when I asked for help paying Mom's bills? And you told me to sell the car or drop out? That was years ago. Exactly. And in those years, I became someone you never saw coming. I hung up because some things don't need closure. Just consequences. At 10 a.m., I walked into the Hawthorne Capital boardroom, my boardroom now. Ryan was already seated at the far end, pale and rattled, trying to look composed in a navy suit. My father sat beside him, hands clasped, trying not to sweat through his shirt. The room fell quiet when I entered. I didn't sit at the side of the table. I walked straight to the head. Good morning, I said. Let's begin. One of the senior partners cleared his throat. Ms. Blake, we weren't aware you were the majority buyer. Correct. I made sure of that. My father finally stood. You can't run this firm. You have no experience. This is a hostile takeover. Hostile. I echoed, arching a brow. No. Hostile would have been firing you all on the spot. I leaned forward. Calm. Controlled. But I didn't. I'm offering you a transition period. A graceful exit. Or you can stay under my leadership. Ryan stood too. You're bluffing. Without a word, I slid a folder across the table to the compliance officer. He opened it. His eyes widened. Then he looked up and simply said, She owns 67.4%. All verified. My father sat down, visibly deflated. Ryan slumped beside him. I stood and said quietly, I never wanted to be your enemy. I just wanted to be your daughter. But you turned your back on me. So I built my own door. Then I walked out. Because power isn't about loudness. It's about knowing when to leave the room. 3 days later, the town was still buzzing. Not just from the headlines, but from the whispers that flowed like wildfire through country clubs, office lounges, and dusty front porches where old neighbors sat with mouths open and hands trembling around their morning coffee. At the gas station where I used to pull 12-hour shifts, someone taped a newspaper clipping to the window. From pump to power, Zoe Blake takes control of Hawthorne Capital. And below it in Sharpa, she always smiled at customers. I stood across the street in my car, watching. Engine humming. Window cracked. A soft breeze pushing through. It wasn't pride I felt. It was peace. Because I hadn't set out for revenge. I didn't want to destroy them. I just wanted them to see me. The real me. Not the version they'd forced into a box and slapped a cheap label on. Not the failure daughter, or the single girl working the register. I was more. I had always been more. They just never looked long enough to see it. My phone buzzed. A text from Nathaniel. Press is requesting a statement. Want to shut them down or speak your truth? I typed back. Let them ask. I'm ready. And I was. That afternoon, I stood on a stage, not at a wedding, not as a joke or afterthought, but at the Arcadia Global Women's Summit in New York City. Behind me was a screen showing my journey from small-town Zoe to boardroom boss. In front of me, hundreds of women in suits, heels, sneakers, scrubs. Some just like me. Some still trying to find their voice. I adjusted the mic, took a deep breath, and spoke. When I was younger, I believed that if I worked hard enough, the people who ignored me would change. That they'd see the effort, the loyalty, the love, and love me back. But sometimes people don't change. And that's okay. I paused, letting the truth land. You don't have to prove yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You just have to believe in what they refuse to see. That's what I did. And I don't say this to flex power. I say this because there is strength in quiet persistence. There is dignity in starting from the bottom. There is fire in being underestimated. A standing ovation, not because of money, but because I told the story so many of them were still living. Afterward, I stepped outside into the bright city air. Nathaniel stood by the SUV, waiting, phone in one hand, sunglasses in the other. You made the front page again, he said with a smile. Oh, God, I groaned. But he held up the phone, and this time, it wasn't a headline about power or capital. It was a blog post, written by someone who had been at the wedding, titled, The Girl We Mocked and the Woman Who Walked Away Stronger. I didn't need to read it, because the caption underneath the photo said enough. Sometimes the loudest statement is a smile, a text, and a helicopter. I laughed, really laughed, as Nathaniel opened the car door for me. But before I stepped in, I looked up at the sky. Clear. Endless. Then back at the life I now owned. I never got the apology I wanted from my father. My brother would likely spend the next decade trying to claw back his pride. But none of that mattered anymore. Because this life? It was mine. Not inherited. Not gifted. Built. With calloused hands. Tired eyes. Silent nights, and a heart that refused to harden. The kind of life that doesn't just rise from the ashes. It sets its own damn fire. If this story hits you even a little, just hit that like button. It helps more than you think. Don't forget to subscribe if you've ever felt this kind of pain. You're not alone.